Well, hi, and welcome back to the Sensibility podcast. Today we have an advisor to the advisors, uh, Fraser Jack. We're going to be talking about goal-based advice. Now, as I said, is an advisor, but he also coaches financial advisors as well. And his concept with the goals-based advice is incredible. I heard him speak at a webinar recently, and I had to get him on. So those who know of me, I love, encouraging people to set goals. I've written articles about that, but the way he articulates it is just out of this world. So I really wanted to get him on and get him to share his process, and also we're going to do it sort of three-pronged way, because he has been the consumer, he's been the advisor, but he's also coached advisors. He's going to give us a sort of concept in all three aspects, if that makes sense. Thank you so much for joining me today, Fraser.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
First of all, can you just explain what goals-based advice is, as opposed to just what we call financial planning or financial advice?
Oh, goodness me, yes. Well, that might be a little bit easier to explain what it isn't to start with. It's probably let me go through. Let me go through from the beginning. Goals-based advice is not what we would imagine to be specialist financial advice, as in the fact that it's not just about one specific product. So we have specialists around that might be investment specialists. We have people might specialize in self-managed super funds, or might specialize in risk or insurance. And those specialties are really getting into the nitty-gritty of the product and the strategies and all those sorts of things. So if anything, I sort of think of goals-based advice as a little more of the GP type style of financial advice that covers a lot of different broad things in somebody's or a human's life. And so it's not sort of the specialist thing. It's also not transactional. So it's not about going in and finding out something, getting one piece of information, advice on a strategy product, and then walking away. It's very much a relationship-based financial planning process. So it's all about the idea that you have a long-term relationship with this advisor, and they almost become they spend a lot of time coaching. They spend some of their time helping you plan. They spend some of their time helping you on the actual advice piece. And it can even get into a little bit of sort of counseling, financial counseling mode. But I would suggest that it shouldn't get into financial counseling. That's sort of where you really need a professional counselor to come in. So it's sort of a broad range. If I think of it from a consumer's point of view, it's like having a long-term, deep relationship with an advisor who's really you're both, the advice for the professional, the planning process, the professional advice around strategy and product, but also more of a coaching role where they can actually help you get to the outcomes. So when I think of goals-based advice, I really think of it being outcome-based. So, getting to a particular outcome. And I think of the analogy of a coach in a sporting scenario trying to win, get to the outcome of winning the end of the game or the grand final. It's not just about all the stuff that's happening, on the field or off the field or whatever it might be. It's getting it to, that we've got a goal to set to try and get to this outcome. And we're going to do everything we can to get there.
Perfectly put. Absolutely. And that sort of brings me to the whole concept of, we had a really crazy year in terms of investing and volatility and whatnot. So it sort of removes that whole aiming for the figure, because if you're giving advice and saying we're going to get you here in this period of time, that's not going to be possible with a year like this year when, the markets have dropped, our balance has dropped and all that kind of thing. So we talked earlier and you raised the concept of it's not really, you know, um, based always on money, the monetary advice. It's more about the relationship with money. Can you talk more about that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that I figure it, I mean, financial advice in its nature is very much, it's easy to fit into or fall into the trap of we're here to give money advice or advice around, this tangible thing we call money. This figures, we're great with spreadsheets. We all geek out over spreadsheets. But, this is the conversation that says these are that, they're very tangible. Numbers are very tangible, right? You can go, okay, great. There is a number. If we do this, we're going to have a bigger number. But they're not emotional, those numbers. And money is, and generally speaking, when it's somebody's money, it's their personal money, and it's emotional. And yet we treat it like it's not emotional. We treat it like it has no emotion. It's just this tangible thing. So we really go back to the idea of saying, well, let's start thinking about the money and let's start thinking about the people, right? The people behind the money, and saying, okay, great. So this is a person, and they may or may have had some money in the past, and they may or may not have worked really hard for that money, or there might be some sort of story or relationship that that money represents to them, not just to them, but to their family and the people around them. They have an idea of what they want that money to represent for their future. There is a whole lot of intangible emotions and feelings around confidence, stress, anxiety, fear, and those sort of intangible things need to be put into the mix of not just, I'm going to take this dollar figure and invest it over here in this specific, option, and the return on that option is going to be Y. It's not about that. It's about saying, how does this money relate to you? What do you need to get out of this money to be fulfilled and satisfied, and these intangible things? And then being able to create a plan around that that says, we're taking way more than just the money, or the emotional money, into a consideration. We're taking the emotions, we're taking the goals, the dreams, hopes, aspirations of the person whose money it is in the first place, and we're helping them design a plan that's going to get them from to where they want to be. Start with, that's the financial planning part, and then help them and coach them through the emotions around that plan and help them stay on the right track. A bit like a pilot flying a plane. I love the analogy too. When it comes to going somewhere from one destination to another, not that we can fly much at the moment, but taking off is optional, landing is compulsory. When it comes to flying, and the rest of the time, the pilot spends, most of the time just correcting the course. 98% of a flight is meant off course, because of side winds and crosswinds and height and things like that. And so the plane moves around, and then the pilot's job is to maintain the course of action. So that's the way that that works, and it's also should be the way that goals-based advice relationship works with the client. Is that the correction of that plan? The plan will, you can put a plan on paper, but it's going to be 98% of the time off course, and it's about correcting
100%.
and moving that, because the landing is compulsory. And so it's saying, no, we're going to use the landing zone at the right time, or near to it as we can. It might be late, it might be early, and we're going to land you safely at the other end.
That's a great analogy, and it's so true, the off course thing. My experience as an advisor and your experience as an advisor, no doubt, is that you'll do a plan for a client, and you understand their goals and objectives, and you're really excited to present to them. And then the review time comes up, and they've turned around and gone, you know what, we're going to sell the house, we're going to do this. And it's completely different to what the initial plan was. And it's then about going, okay, what we've got to work on is not really the assets as such. It's their experience along the way, knowing that they now have the freedom, and they're feeling on course in some respects with their money, to get to the destination that they now decide is not going to be there but there. And I think that's really with the difference with goal-based advice, is that the 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 journey does evolve and change, but the job actually, the satisfying part is actually the, I guess, the increase of confidence you see in the clients. You talked about that with Em when I heard you on the webinar. Is that it's goal-based advice can be measured so differently, as opposed to just measuring it on that monetary value. It's like where we've gone from here to there, and often it's more about the emotional relationship with your money.
100%. It's more about their emotional relationship, and it's very easy to write a financial plan when you're just taking into consideration the financial aspects of the plan. It's very easy to say, if you do this, then you will get what, those sorts of things. It's very simple to say that, but if you're not understand, and that's where goals-based advice really kicks in, because there's a bit more to it than just saying, what are your financial goals? Let's put them on paper and move forward. It's about understanding the human behind those goals, and their personal values, and what sort of things they value. What are the things that they want? Is it their Is it their goal, or is it somebody else's goal that they've been told that they think that they should have? And really understanding, is it something that, like, somebody might value, not being locked down, value the ability to travel and move around and be and transient, and then they want to buy a house, and you think, well, that doesn't make sense for what you value. You might not want to buy a house. You might want to have this ability to. So that's where we find people tend to change their goals a lot, is because they may have set a goal that's not actually congruent with their own beliefs and values. And so to be able to work with your clients on that, and obviously with couples, that's another thing that comes up a lot, because sometimes couples have different values, and they, sure, they might love each other and the opposites attract and all these sorts of things, but those values might mean that their goals are very different, or the things that they might want to set are very different. And so it's that, and then negotiating, we'll have some of this and some of that together, makes a partnership around the idea of saying, what are these goals going to be that we're going to work towards? Because it's very easy to set goals that are incongruent with the client, because they sound like they should be good financial goals, and this is where often advisors come in and say, well, most people do this, they always have that, and so therefore we think you should also have that. And so there's a lot involved in the initial, very first part of understanding the client's beliefs, their behaviors, those things they've done in the past, what have caused them to be who they are and to be where they are at the moment, but before getting financial advice. So there's a lot of information that sort of to go through well before working out what the plan's going to be. So the advice piece, as we like to call it, the advice piece in the financial advice process.
And that just comes to that where I said, I'm going to lift the lid on the coach that you are to advisors. If you don't mind just giving some tips, or how we as advisors can establish that information, get that information, draw that information out of a client, that, they come to you going, right, the right thing to say is, or they don't even think that's the right thing. They've been at a barbecue, their mates are buying investment properties, and that seems to be the way to get financially on board, or, on track to making it, or to retire early, whatever the case may be. They're sitting there, and you really start sensing that's not true goal for them, based on other, positive, other signs, other maybe language, body language. Can you just lift the lid on how you get that information out, and how you teach advisors that as well?
Yeah, this is certainly where the behavioral coaching comes into the phrase. So the very first thing, putting yourself in the client's shoes to say, what's the pressing need that has forced them to take this step or a leap of faith towards coming into a financial advice office. Often people don't just wake up one morning and go, oh, I might just go see a financial advisor today. That sounds like a fantastic idea. Let's go and do it. They go, oh yeah, I should get some support. Yeah, I should ask. I should reach out. Yeah, but they don't do it just yet. Then something happens that often causes them to that motivation to go, I actually need to go now. And that could be, I'm just purchased a house, or I'm doing this, or something's happened, or there's, somebody just got married, or somebody just did something. There's often a milestone in somebody's life where they go, okay, I'm going to go now. And they take that leap of faith around, going in and seeing, maybe interviewing a couple of advisors, or understanding. One is they're not really sure what all this process is going to be, and to how much it's going to cost, and is it going to cost me more than have I got enough money to go? There's a lot of questions that go through a client's head. But once they come in, I think for the financial advisor, really just needs to triage what was the burning cause of the need right now, and then to go through the concept of, this is how we best serve and best help people. We go through this. It's it's a long-term relationship, et cetera, et cetera. We get to the bottom of this. Then once you start getting into that financial, the questions around their hopes, dreams, goals, aspirations, understanding somebody's beliefs and values is the first step, and really getting to the bottom. Understanding their past behaviors is another thing, because it's very easy for people to say, how much money do you earn? How much money do you spend? Is it more or less than what you earn? And then understanding whether there's any behaviors in there, understanding what money was like with them they were growing up, understanding why they think of money in a certain way, why they believe certain things. And let's face it, nobody really knew about money when we were kids. There then there was a thing called money, and then we understood it, and then we reflected on how our parents brought us up with regards to what their beliefs around money were, and we take on these beliefs as our own, but they were our parents' beliefs, uh,
Absolutely. There's a lot
or
of
whoever.
subconscious stuff going on in there.
Absolutely. And so then there could be a scenario of, why do you believe that? Does everyone believe that? If that was true, wouldn't everyone be in that position? Some people aren't, so they don't believe it. Does everyone have to believe it? Do you want to believe it? What do you want to believe? So there is a bit of a process that you can go through with a lot of the work like you're doing with coaching people. Then there's the scenario of understanding what their goals are. And it's very easy to say, your goal is to do this. And, if we look at a lot of advice documents, the statement of advice that financial advisors give to their clients, a lot of them say things like, client had a goal to consolidate their superannuation funds into one. And I'm thinking that's not a goal, that's a financial strategy. Their goal is they want to retire one day and they want to do X, Y, Z when they retire. And part of getting them to that thing is the advisor introduces a financial strategy to help them get more money in their superannuation or whatever it might be. But then the next question is, why do you want that? And when it comes to understanding whether a goal is for somebody or somebody else, is to ask them why. Ask the client, why is that? Why do you need that? And if the answer is about other people, or it might be about themselves. See, there's this thing about finding your why and all that. And to be honest, a why is a really selfish thing. So if somebody says, because I want this, and I want to do these things because I believe in this, then that is a why. Where if somebody says, oh, because I think we should do that before the thing and the kids and the blah, 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 it's like, that's not the why. That's for them. It's
Mm-hmm.
not your why. Like, what's motivating you to want to be that person? And that could be because I really want to be known as a good parent, and I want my kids to, love me, and I want other people to see me as a good parent. Great, that's a selfish why you might do something. So you're getting to that real underlying motivation behind, because those are the things that are going to keep the client on track, right? So if you can get to that selfish why level, then you can say to the client, remember that thing you wanted? Remember we were doing this? Remember we weren't spending money on that because we were going to do this thing because you wanted to feel good about being a good parent. You wanted other people to see you as a good parent. Remember that? Great. That's why we're doing this. And then they can go, yeah, get back on track. And it provides that underlying motivation to say, I'm going to ignore all my limiting beliefs and things I've learned in the past. And I'm going to determinately do these things for this thing because it selfishly gives me pleasure or enjoyment or joy or love or satisfaction or whatever it might be, by doing those things to get to those outcomes, because I understand, the advisor can help understand what their why is.
Wow. It's interesting because what we do to study and the CPD training, and now we're doing even more training to also lift our professionalism even higher. Most of us now, I know many have gone, you're doing their masters. You did yours a couple of years ago, I recall. No, wasn't it
No,
masters?
I haven't done my financial planning masters. No.
Oh, okay. There was something I saw that you did. Anyway, it doesn't matter. We,
Yep.
we never learn this. And this is, I believe, and this is why I started doing the money coaching, which is the past behaviors, which sort of shed light on why we do certain things. This is actually the key part in my belief, and this is why I wanted you to come on this podcast, is if we get this right, and this is for anybody if they want to do their own financial planning or if they want to get an advisor to give them the guidance and coach them, get this part right, then it's going to be so easy for you to get to A to B and B to C and so on and so on. Um, so, sometimes we've got to unlearn some of the stuff we learned to actually get that information out there. How long does it take for you to get that process happening, to that really nitty gritty conversation, to find out and discover exactly what the why is and to establish what their true goals are?
Yeah, it can take a little while to get generally to get the first couple, but then once you're into a process and you go, oh, I get going through these serious questions or harder questions that make me think internally, gets me to this outcome. Then after the first couple, it's like, yes, no, it's the same reason, it's the same why, it's the same motivation. So it's one of those things that, like, the first, you're in first gear and it takes a while to get momentum up, and then by the time you've got to the second or third gear, you're moving quite quickly. So I think there's it's not about how you might have 10 different goals, right? But the first three take a bit of time, and the next ones are very quick. But I also like the fact that when it comes to goals-based financial advice, is there are some things that require strategies, complex financial strategies to be introduced. There are some things that require, financial products, financial-based products to be introduced. And that's all part of financial advice, role, to as a professional to look at those and to consider those and the options and work out which is the best one for the client or the most appropriate for the client. So there's that part of it, but that part of it is actually quite a small part of the overall process. Like getting to know and understand the client in the first place is a big part of the process, and
Mm.
it's a very weird one when it comes to how financial advisors charge and have charged and for many years based on the product and based on the advice that they're giving, and it's we have a legislation here called fee for service, and it talks about the idea of how you're charging parts of the legislation around fee for service, how you're charging a fee for service, which is financial advisors have found really difficult because you can get service at a fast food restaurant for under $10. It's sort of like this: how much do you pay for service? And then that became the idea of fee for advice and fee for financial planning, which then became more tangible and easy to charge. That we've still got this hangover of these product-based, whatever your product is. And I've got a lot of sort of beliefs around that. And to me, it shouldn't really, all that stuff should be, if we just clear that out and start it again, we should be charging fees for the value we're providing. And I don't believe you can work out what the value is based on the amount of money they have. I think you can work out what the value is based on taking them what the clients actually value, right? So if I value freedom and laughter and enjoyment and if I can get all those things, that's what I should be paying my advisor for, right? Not to manage my money per se. That's part of their job. Don't get me wrong, but that's not the main part of their job. They're managing my outcomes of being whatever I need to be is the actual job. So it's a little bit strange for a lot of advisors. And I want to go back a step because the financial advice profession was born out of many years of product distribution. And, big companies had products. It might have been a life insurance product or a superannuation product or whatever it was, right? It was a product. And then the client basically, or the consumer had to get to know, understand these particular products, and that they were complex. So financial advisors became, the people who helped explain those products and understand, the client. And the financial advisor would represent the client based, but still is very much about bringing products in. And if you look at a lot of financial advice websites these days of financial planners and financial advisors, you'll see a lot of them say on their websites that we provide advice around insurance and advice around superannuation and all these products that are still in there. And a lot of advisors will measure their practice and their worth like they're investment advisors, which is not what we're talking about. If you're an investment advisor and you just deal in specialized investment, that's one thing, but you're not a goals-based advice advisor. And if you are a goals-based advisor, you shouldn't be saying, oh, we measure our, how much of funds under management or all those sorts of things that we look at. If you're a fund manager, you do that. If you're investing, if you're the one that's actually choosing the investments and doing all that, then that's your job. But as a financial advisor doing goals-based advice, that's not your job. Your job is to essentially manage the outcomes of the client's goals, not manage the money that they walked in the door with. Um,
Yeah.
you're there to invest it, but the fund manager's job is to manage the money, as in manage, as in buy, sell, and trade. Your job is to manage the client's expectations and their behaviors and the things that are going to influence them hitting their goals.
It's like I think you, you articulated it lovely in that webinar that I listened to. Um, Using the medical profession um, and and the medicine are the products. So, for example, you come to the advisor. It's like going to the doctor. It's going to the professional and saying, "Well, these are the issues I've got. I'm I need to, I've got this amount, I need to retire with this amount. So with this bit of a gap, I am concerned because of and obviously we're dealing with a few things here where they might be concerned that they're not got enough insurance. They might have not enough superannuation. But there are other things because you've really brought out the why. Well, the why is I want to know that I've got freedom and I can just my family are going to be okay and I can get up and we can just go overseas whenever or whatever the goal is. So you then as advisor can prescribe in part of that as a strategy, the product, but that isn't actually the whole picture. The whole picture is the feeling, the emotions, knowing that you can sleep well at night without anxiety of I don't have enough because you know you're going to get there. So I love how you had said that in the past. I wanted to bring that again to light how that the product is actually not how you measure goals advice at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So the doctor analogy is around the concept of somebody goes to the doctor because they want to feel better or get better or be healthy or whatever it might be, and the same thing with financial advice. And it's a very similar professional process, right? You come in and they ask a lot of questions about your past and what you're doing and how you're experiencing your symptoms and those sorts of things. Now, a doctor doesn't work out doesn't have this financial metric that financial advisors have, so they use other metrics like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much pain are you in, et cetera, et cetera. And then they can measure that post the treatment to see how much pain you're in, and then they can work out whether you now are in a better position or when now if you're feeling better or all those sorts of things. So there's no reason that doctors can do it. But the GP process is you go in, you provide a lot of information, you might do some tests, some blood tests, other tests, keep getting information until the doctor has enough information to be able to diagnose what their condition is. And and that's very similar to the planning process, the understanding and setting your goals and diagnosing that's what we want to do and what we want to be. The doctor then goes and creates a treatment plan, which is a bit like a financial advisor doing some planning around what strategies you might look and introduce. Now that treatment plan, by the way, may or may not involve any medication. It could involve diet and exercise. It could, like the medication comes at the very end. And it's part of the treatment plan. It's not the treatment plan; it's part of the treatment plan. So the treatment plan then is worked out. So that there's the diagnosis, the treatment plan, and then there's a prescription for medication if needed. Now, and that's very much the same around the financial product advice that advisors provide. So the strategy, the planning, then the product advice, and that's so the two professional processes are very similar in a lot of ways. And so when one of the things that we say in the medical, or they say in the medical profession is prescription before diagnosis is malpractice, right? And so the same with financial advice. You can't just jump to the prescription. You've got to work out why it is. Now, if you wanted to go and buy some headache tablets or something, you might go to the chemist and purchase it from the chemist. And very similar, there's financial products available under, general advice processes and other things in Australia that you can go and purchase. You can go and buy something up without getting financial advice. But generally speaking, that's up to you then to try and find out why, all the pros and cons, and whether that actually fits with your circumstances. So that's part of the role of an advisor, that planning and advice piece. But I don't know how you can do it properly or justice if you're not doing all that front end piece around understanding their hopes, dreams, goals, aspirations, and wondering how this is going to fit with their long term. Because if you just creating that transactional short term band-aid solution, then it may or may be the wrong band-aid.
100%. So it comes always back to that whole process of really getting that information of what their true why is and what their values are and whatnot. So then you can, as you sort of pointed out, measure, how much pain are you feeling if you go to the doctor, say you've broken your arm and he's got the treatment or whoever's got the treatment process in place, like we do. When they come back to us as advice, to the advisor, it's more about, okay, now how are you feeling about your finances now? That's the measuring, as opposed to let's look at the balance. There's a point I was trying to go to before, and it may have been lost there when I said we had a really volatile year, measuring the balance of your investment would be a terrible way of measuring that goal. It's more about actually, you know what, I've had a sit down with my advisor. I understand that, yeah, we're going through a really volatile time, but I'm still on track. I feel good about where we're going. I understand that there is a great strategy in place, but more to it, I really know where I'm going and I'm feeling comfortable, or the long-term picture is now looking clearer for me, or I actually now have a better handle on my cash flow because I actually understand who I am about it. Because that's the other thing, one of the things that I work, it's the cash flow stuff can really make, turn the sales to the plan as part of it as well, which isn't product. It's again behavior. It's again the goal.
Absolutely. So there's a couple of really great points you made there. One is that financial advisors have this part of a legislation that they must demonstrate clear and measurable objectives. That's all written into the legislation. Now, very quickly, financial planners jump to the meaning that clear and measurable means money, measuring money, right? So how many fees were charged on that versus returns, how much was et cetera, et cetera. Am I in a better position based on financially? And it's a really narrow way of understanding it, because as you mentioned, being worried and upset and anxious and stressed and not sure versus being knowing, confident, no stress, all those sort of things can be a tangible and objective benefit from being, and same as the doctor conversation. So I think that's a really important consideration, that a lot of financial advisors should be then using those clear and measurable. You were here emotionally, now you're here emotionally, and there is a a great benefit. So I think that's probably the first point on that. What was the next part of the question you mentioned?
Um, well, when I talked to, was it in regards to a crazy year like we've had, measuring that versus the emotional state. Then I also uh, try to think now.
The
I
second
covered a
point,
lot. I talk too much.
the second point I wanted to make on that, but it's just escaped me at the minute.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it probably will come back. I mean,
Well,
this is the beauty of these chats. Also, because I mean, there's so much that we could talk about, and I'll probably get you back on because this is quite a new concept to our industry. It's something that made a lot of sense to me some time ago, and where I'd get frustrated. You write this amazing financial plan, you meet with clients that they're nowhere near where we expect them to be. They're still back at the beginning, back at the starting point, because they're a bit like deer in the headlights because no one has had these conversations about how they're feeling or what their true values are and whatnot. So there is a lot. This is still quite a new concept in what we do. So I'm sure that there are a lot of people who have walked away from financial advice scratching their heads saying, and I've had those kind of clients come back to me and hand me a massive document like thick like this and go, there's the SOA. Nothing's really being done, or besides, I've got new super, I've got different insurance policies. They say we're going to have this amount of money when we retire, but I'm a bit lost still. And this is
yeah.
why I love this concept of goals-based advice.
Oh yeah, it's definitely way more engaging. And I did think of the other thing too, by the way. But it really comes back down to the concept of motivation, right? And that there is a thing that the plan. Oh, this plan, it didn't work for me. Well, it probably didn't work for you. Didn't work with you. Didn't work with it. Like that's a two-way street conversation. And what I wanted to mention before was about the idea of cash flow. The and that's the biggest thing that the client can control, right? They can control what they earn, and they can control what they spend. And you might say, oh, I can't control what I earn, but technically you can. Like
If you've
you
got the right motivation.
yes, correct. And so if you're not motivated as part of your plan, then you're not going to stick to it, right? It's just like it's not I don't feel the love in that plan or the motivation or anything that's going to motivate me to stick to the plan. So I can control what I earn, and if I don't earn enough, I can go get a spare, I can go drive Uber or something to top it up. And I can control what I spend. And those are the two things that the client can control the most. And the advisor can help them stay motivated in that space, and they can do all the things advisors do when it comes to strategy and product as well to help out. but keeping the client motivated in those two things is really, really super important. And having that the regular conversations and updates, and that's why I said it's got to be such an ongoing relationship piece, because the advisor can say, based on your current behavior over the last 3 months, this is what's happened to the plan. This is what's changing. This is where we need to keep back on track. That whole flight conversation, and then helping the client get their head around and making positive financial decisions, not just emotional financial decisions. That's where it's all about. And we can make. I'm a big fan of the idea that we can make financial decisions emotionally, and some financial decisions we make because they make sense on paper. And generally, the ones that are made because they make sense on paper, over the long run, they turn out to be better financial decisions than the ones we made emotionally. But still, 90% of the decisions we make are emotional. Do I want that extra thing in the supermarket trolley? That I don't really need, but I'm going to eat it anyway? Do I want that extra pair of shoes that I don't really need, but they look good on me, so they make me feel good, so I'm going to grab them? What are those decisions? And then at that moment of emotional, decision making, are we able to then go back and say, but then I'm not going to be able to have that other thing I discussed with the planner, and I'm going to have to explain why I bought these extra things. And so let me just stick to the plan. Right. So it's about that motivation to stick to the plan, and take control and be in charge of and be confident with the things that you can control, which is cash flow, and understand why you're doing things, because you've got certainty, you've got clarity, you've got understanding, all these things that come out of these intangible things that come out of seeing a financial advisor, that no one really talks about.
Yeah, and it is a movement that I'm seeing more advisors, especially up and coming advisors, now looking at it as the way forward. And there's all these other things like the money coaching concept, but just changing our language and using the word goals as in part of the goals-based advice, as opposed to financial planning or financial advice, is also really important. Now, I'm going to bring back to what you do, because you're, as I mentioned earlier, you're a financial advisor. You've also been the consumer
I'm not a financial advisor at the
at the
moment.
moment, but you have been.
I was
Yeah,
a financial advisor, yes, but just want
yeah.
to be clear that I'm not a licensed financial advisor at the moment.
Quick disclaimer there. Yes, yes, but you have been, but you've also been in the financial advice industry for quite a long time. I can't. We've known
Yeah,
each other
20 odd years, yeah.
we've known each other for many years as well. So I've seen you around the traps, and you do coaching for financial advice, and you're now working on a few different courses. So some courses for the consumer, some courses and other courses for the advisor to help them improve these, what we call in the industry, soft skills, which I think actually the hardest skills. If you don't get it right, it can ruin the whole plan.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a big part, as I mentioned before, emotional decisions versus financial. It's the logical stuff, the strategies, understanding the technical pieces of the advice. That's like 20%, in my opinion, of what makes up a good financial advisor. You have to have them. It's essential. It's the grounding. Without good financial strategy, you're not a financial advisor. But the emotional side of being able to communicate, to be able to maintain a relationship, to be able to understand what really makes somebody tick, is the stuff that comes generally over time with financial planners. It's very difficult to have that when you first start out, to be able to ask those difficult questions and get into the nitty gritty, and not just accept, somebody says something and just accept that as gospel, when you might think there is an underlying different issue there that you haven't got to the bottom of yet. So yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that I do some coaching with financial advisors, but I also do some financial literacy. Well, I hate the word financial literacy, but I think it's confidence. And that I've got this opinion that a lot of financial advice is for people who already have quite a bit of money and can afford it. Let's just say that, right? It's for that. And in any particular market, whether it's, there's a prestige end. Whether it's first class tickets on an airline, or whether it's, Prada handbags or expensive restaurants, there is generally an elite or expensive end of any particular market or industry. And I think that financial advice for financial planners, because of the cost to provide it, is very much in that prestige end of the general marketplace when it comes to every single, mum, dad, Australian people walking the streets, that probably need some sort of financial education, but don't necessarily get financial advice yet. So I think sort of 10% of any particular market is a prestige end. There's easily 10% of people in Australia getting financial advice that are in that zone. I also think that when it comes to providing information for the rest of the people that don't get financial advice, there's a few things out there. Obviously, there's books you can pick up and read, or whatever it might be, some blog sites, etc. But I'm really focused on saying, well, okay, well, I'm going to try and focus on the Netflix generation, those people who want to consume content slightly differently, that want to consume content watching Netflix instead of buying newspapers, and say, how do I provide something for those people in the way of like a Netflix style video for just general confidence, talking about money and mindsets and understanding, things that might work or go wrong in that whole process of just getting people confidence so they can have financial conversations with, financial advisors.
Yeah, speaking, what is it? Preaching to the choir there. That just was music to my ears, because that's sort of the direction I've taken, as I mentioned to you earlier, and why I'm doing my podcast is I really want to make money normal. I really want to see people being confident with money. Money causes huge amounts of stress and anxiety and relationship problems and even mental health issues. It breaks relationships. It makes relationships. It does so many things. It's energetic in so many ways. But if we just shed the light on it and start being more confident about it, and I think the way you've addressed the concept of goals-based advice is a great place for people to start having that conversation with money. Is like, well, what is it that I really want out of my money? And then to get to that maybe point of confidence to go, I'm prepared to speak to someone who can really create a strategy, understand my needs to make it actually happen, is one thing. But there are baby steps to that, even as we are in Netflix generation. Instant gratification. People live off their phones. They want information at snippets. The only time I'm sort of getting myself into learning something is if I've got my earpods in and I'm walking my baby, or I'm driving my car. That's it, because my time is so limited. So what you're doing is fantastic in creating this platform of information for people to be able to get these bite-sized information to get confidence, and then eventually, if they do need to come and see someone like myself or other advisors, and there are many out there that are willing and wanting to work like this. This is the way forward, which is also why you're doing this work with advisors as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, the Netflix generation. I think people are have that emotion around their money, and this idea of it being a taboo subject is just crazy, because this is a flow from the whole class system, right? The upper class, the middle class, the low class, right? And using money as a way of treating people differently and pushing them into to a different class, which was absolutely crazy. When we're going through things like the Black Lives Matter movement and all these sort of things, we need to get rid of the how much money you have matters measurement, because some people are completely happy, joyful, satisfied, proud, a whole lot of great emotions based on how much money they have, but other aspects, and they could have no money but they're still really happy, right? Or you could have a lot of money and be unhappy. So there is no that metric of the more money you have, the happier you are, is crazy. And so the conversation around, well, how much do you need to do all the things that will satisfy you and please you and make you happy? And then that becomes your benchmark, right? Not benchmarking against other people, not benchmarking
Benchmarking
against the
against.
most money, but benchmarking against your emotional aspects of, are you happy with that amount of money? That's where you should be going to. And I think a lot of the time in financial advice, we've been the financial advisors that were coming through, all very competitive in nature most of the time, are helping their clients or competing with the idea that we want to try and get you to as high as possible, not taking into the fact that, well, maybe you'd just be happy with half that amount.
Mm. Well, I often ask, what when we're talking about they want financial security. What does that feel? What does it look like? It's more about an emotion than a number. And then we talk about, well, if, usually it comes down to, I'm happy with what I'm earning, just as long as it continues. So, okay, then that we've got something, a little bit, something then I can actually then put into a strategy to go, okay, you're comfortable with this amount. You're concerned if that amount stops, that tap stops dripping. So let's create an everflow of this amount that you can continuously fill your cup with. Um, then it's easy for me to really come back to, here's a plan for that. But it's more about what makes you feel comfortable. And I hope that anyone who's listening, whether you have an advisor, you're considering seeing an advisor, or you are an advisor, that these conversations are brought to light, that you actually think about really, what is it that pleases me? The big why, and it's okay to be selfish with, as you pointed out. It's a selfish thing, but it's going to be the internal motivator for you, right? If you don't have that, the plan's not going to work.
Yep. Yeah, exactly right. And a lot of advisors that I talk to in this space have, are setting up, understand their own sort of values. What makes them happy in a business? Like yourself, you're really happy when you're helping another person get or do something, especially, if they're in need, and then you can put the time and you can help them. That's something that brings you personally joy. So therefore, that's why your business has moved into this more of this model
Yeah,
than you know um, doing investment and getting outperforming a benchmark by X%, and that's because that was just sort of that's a non-emotional number. So
that's why I got my husband in the business, because
yeah.
that's his job.
So that's sort of and then understanding if that's what you want to do in a business, those are that's and helping those clients in that way is what's pleasing, which is pleasing you, which is your selfish why your business is this way it is. And the same, when people get those feelings of, and it doesn't have to just be happy, feelings of pride, being really proud of what you've achieved, feelings of happiness and joy, and all these sort of things that come into when it comes to setting goals as to, well, if I've achieved that, then it shouldn't matter what other people have, or what whether I outperformed a benchmark, or my returns were better than normal or whatever. None of that really matters. What matters is that you're happy and comfortable and you feel good about yourself.
100%. There's so much more we could talk about, but I will have to wrap this up, because we're just going to keep going. But I want to know, have you got a time frame of when you're going to be rolling out the content that you're providing, non-advisors, so the consumer? I know the other advisor you're working with, Erin, who mentioned that she's doing this project with you some time ago. So have you guys got a launch date, or are you making traction? Are we got something to expect soon?
Yeah. So it's very softly out there at the moment. Can I talk about it, or is it? Are we? Yes,
Yeah,
we good
cool.
to talk about. Very good.
Cool.
So I've got a website called nerdherd.money, nerdherd.money, which is really around the financial literacy, financial confidence, and on there there's actually a course I've written called the 12 Steps to Financial Confidence. The 12 steps concept is nothing new. You can be able to see them around another anonymous organizations, but certainly we've got a 12 steps to financial confidence course, which is free to download, and go through the process. And yeah, at nerdhood.money we have a video blog, a podcast, and we also have a paid membership which people can join and become part of a community of other fellow nerds, and be involved and get all the courses that we have as part of that membership. So.
Yeah, I'm a big believer, you can't get enough information. So, and there's no competition between us as advisors, because I think the message needs to be clear. And sometimes people really resonate really well with, they may go on your site and think this is fantastic and jump on my course and go, not my gig. And that's absolutely fine. Just get that information and run with it, and have a better relationship with your money. And that's sort of at the end of the day, the goal, right? It's going to really improve things.
Absolutely. I think that any information you can get and pick up and gather over time is better than not getting information. And as I said, this is not a site where you go to get financial advice. This is a site where you go just to get confidence and information. And so you can go off and have conversations with advisors from a place of a bit more confidence, a bit more understanding, a bit more empowerment, if you like.
Brilliant. Well, we'll put this in the show notes anyway. And then if anyone wants to reach out to me to get in touch with Fraser, please do. Another call to action is that if you like what you hear, please share, and also rate this sensibility podcast, because it's just still at grassroots, and I'm just getting things happening now. So I hope to see more and more people jumping on board and having a listen to this. Thank you so much, Fraser, for your time today. I really appreciate it. Loved what we talked about, and I would love to get you, maybe even Erin, on in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.